Uh, Good evening, everyone. So welcome to the seminar series. We have with us today Professor Yash Kanoria. Just a brief introduction about Professor Kanoria. He is an associate professor of business in the Decision Risk and Operations Division at Columbia Business School, working on the design and operations of marketplaces, especially matching markets. Previously, he obtained a BTech in Electrical Engineering from IIT Bombay in 2007, a PhD from Stanford in 2012, and he has spent a year at Microsoft Research New England during 2012-13 as a Shrum postdoc fellow. He received an NSF Career Award in 2017. He was a finalist for the 2018 prize in Operations Research Practice for the design of a large-scale centralized seat allocation process for engineering colleges in India. Apart from the brief introduction that I mentioned, his research is really, really awesome. As much as I can understand, the topics are super interesting, and he uses some awesome maths to solve the problems. So thanks once again, Yash, for accepting our invite, and we are so pleased to have you with us. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much, Anuj. Thank you for the invite, and thank you all for coming out to the seminar today. This paper is from a couple years back. It just got published, and as all of us know, it takes a while between the work and the publication. So it appeared in Management Science. It was a featured article in October this year, I think. This is joint work with Daniela Saban, who's my co-author at Stanford GSP. We call this facilitating the search for partners on matching platforms. So I've done a bunch of work inspired by matching platforms, and a few of those papers are focused on this issue of market congestion, which means that you have the market and that people are trying to find their suitable match partners, but it's somehow very, very hard to make that a reality. And this is particularly a challenge in labor markets and dating markets and also some other matching markets, because really what you need is a double coincidence of wants. Like, it's not like I go to a supermarket, I find something I like, I pay for it and I get it, right? Here the market consists of people on the other side, and they are treating me like a product as well, and we both need to sort of buy the product for the match to happen. And this is much more challenging. So this is something that I think even in the real world we are very much still grappling with. It takes years for people to find their partner. It takes years for people to sort of land in the place that they want to for their careers. And anything we can do to make things better on this front, I think, would be very helpful for society at large, and of course also would make money potentially for the company that's able to pull this off, if this is a for-profit enterprise. So here in this particular work, we focus on marketplaces where agents are on. So now the terminology will become a bit more technical. So agents on both sides of the market have heterogeneous preferences over potential matches. These preferences are partly unknown to the platform, and even for the agents, they need to spend some effort to learn the valuation for a potential partner, and they can do this non-simultaneously at some cost. So what I mean by non-simultaneously is you can think of an app, let's say a dating app. You see a profile, you can decide if I'm interested or not in this profile, but this doesn't require the other person to be simultaneously making an effort. And if you decide you're interested, then the app can decide to show you as a potential match to the other side as well. Okay? So this is sort of the way things work in the online world, and it can be a source of efficiency or sort of making the search process more efficient. So examples of markets that inspired us. None of these is meant to be the sole focus of this work. It's more foundational. But examples are online dating, accommodation like Airbnb, and labor markets. So each platform has their own search design. Okay, so what environment are agents searching for potential partners in? And this includes who can reach out first, And also they have their information disclosure policy, which is whether quality information is made freely visible to the participants. Okay, so here's some examples of real world markets. So here, the first bucket is labor markets, and the two sides are clients and freelancers. You have two examples here, Upwork and TaskRabbit, and already there is a divergence in the design of the platforms. In Upwork, either side can reach out to the other side. And in TaskRabbit, actually the clients need to petition the taskers or the potential workers and say, hey, will you do my job for me? Okay, so they reach out first. And this is the new design, by the way. TaskRabbit's old design had the opposite, where the workers were supposed to be bidding on the jobs. So there is heterogeneity between different platforms. In heterosexual dating, there's Bumble, which has its unique feature where women are the ones who are required to reach out first in order for a conversation to start. Whereas most other dating apps, either side can make the first move in terms of messaging. And quality information is hidden in these dating apps, okay, in contrast to labor market apps or platforms. And then you have accommodation, and it might now seem obvious that Airbnb and other competitors, they always have the guest reaching out first to the host saying, hey, I'm interested in your place. But this is not how it used to be. So there was in the US, there was this platform called Craigslist, and you can just go and post, hey, I'm going to LA next weekend. I need to find a place close to Venice Beach, which where I can stay from Friday to Sunday. And then they'll wait for the other side to reach out to sort of respond to that. So these are various designs, and we see sort of differences across platforms. So the questions, we have sort of three high-level questions that we will be interested in here. So one is, so why might search design be important? Okay, so in fact, like these are the motivating questions, and then we'll come to the research questions in a minute. So why might search design be important? So it can affect the user experience, including the search effort that the user needs to put in. And it crucially can affect the match formation rate and the match quality, or in other words, the performance of the marketplace in terms of matching itself. And then, of course, if people are getting good matches, more will come to use the platform. And if not, then the platform is not going to do well. So one might ask, do search frictions play a role in the online world, right? So now with everything being online, one might think, hey, that really reduces friction and problems are going to go away. Things are going to be much, much better. There's a lot of evidence that this doesn't seem to be happening in the way one might have naively expected. So there is a major impact of search frictions on the match rate and the match quality. And this has been documented on many of the big platforms, including TaskRabbit, Airbnb, and Upwork, among others. Okay, big impacts of search frictions. So then one might ask, okay, I mean, search frictions are making a difference. Now, is the search design going to be effective in potentially reducing the impact of these frictions? Does it even matter? And it seems that it does matter. One sort of soft evidence is that these platforms keep on changing their designs. And presumably that's because they think something is not working and it might work better in a different design. And this particular paper actually documented this redesign at TaskRabbit, where there were many changes, but one of them was that instead of the taskers reaching out, the clients were supposed to reach out basically after the new design, and this seemed to significantly improve the quality and number of matches and just overall the market performance. Okay, so now the research questions. So the first question is, okay, in some platforms, one side of the market reaches out to the other side, not the other way around. So, and some similarly, some platforms hide quality information. So what are the appropriate design choices for a given marketplace, a given matching marketplace, as a function of its inherent characteristics? Okay. So we'll be looking at these two particular sort of dimensions of design in this paper, but also we develop a sort of methodology which can be applied in other kinds of markets and for other kinds of design questions. Okay, so can we create a modeling and analysis framework which will enable us to understand what equilibria to expect as a function of the platform design choice, and how the design choices as a result will affect the welfare of market participants and help the platform pick the appropriate design. Okay. So the thought is there's a design. As a result, there's some equilibrium. You can see how well different people are doing in different in different equilibria that arise under different designs, and hence pick the best design. Okay, depending on what you care about. By the way, if you have questions or comments, feel free to interrupt. While I'm speaking, mostly clarification would be in order, and then hopefully I'll finish with some time to spare, and we can have a deeper discussion as well. Right? But basically, anything comes to mind, feel free to chime in. There was some chat message. Okay, that was just about the videos. Okay. So now here's some sort of just teaser statistics from the heterosexual dating world. So typically in these dating platforms, both men and women can reach out to each other. It seems like the situation is not symmetric though. So there's an unfavorable ratio for men. They seem to have a couple of difficulties, right? So there's more than 60% men on most of these platforms. And when they reach out to a woman, their proposal is rarely accepted. So I imagine these stats must be even more skewed in India. 2.5 times less often on OkCupid and 15 times less often on Tinder than for women. Okay, so it seems like men have some difficulties or had these difficulties even some years back when. Nevertheless, Bumble came in and seemed to make it even harder for them, because Bumble said the man cannot send the first message. If a conversation is to begin, the woman has to send the first message. Okay. So this is kind of potentially making things even worse for men. Now let's see. Yeah, so let's just keep that at the back of our mind as we go on with this work, and then we'll come back to this. So this is a summary of our contributions and findings. So we introduce a modeling framework which has dynamic arrivals and departures of agents. The agents are strategic with heterogeneous preferences on both sides of the market. And they have idiosyncratic match values, meaning values for matching with potential partners, which are unknown to the platform and discoverable non-simultaneously by agents, but they need to spend a screening cost to discover their value for a potential partner. What we find is that design matters. It has two potential effects. One is it can help to select between different equilibria, and even more important, it can create new equilibria which are superior to the equilibria that would have arisen under a default design. So in terms of concrete sort of managerial insights, one is when one side of the market has a tendency to be more selective, you should make that side make the proposals. They should be the one to reach out. And when you have quality information and there is heterogeneous qualities on the long side, which the platform knows, the platform should partially hide the quality information about the long side agents. Long side means the one which has more agents, like the men in heterosexual dating. So it should partially hide quality information about the long side agents to prevent short side agents from obsessing over dream matches while ignoring other options. Okay, so what was there something?
Sir, what do we mean by exactly non-simultaneously? Is one side happens to go after the other side?
Yeah, so suppose so there's suppose we are on some date some matching platform, right? Let's say it's not dating, something else. I see your profile, I can decide whether I'm interested or not, and this doesn't mean that you have ever seen my profile or you're at that moment even engaged in this process at all. So I can say I'm interested, and then they at that point will send you some notification saying, oh, this person is interested, what do you think? So this is happening sequentially, not simultaneously.
Okay.
So the reason, I'm sort of emphasizing this is because like the traditional models of search frictions in labor markets. So this is the Mortensen, Pissarides literature. So these guys got a diamond. So these guys got a Nobel Prize, but they don't have this non-simultaneous feature because it was not as relevant probably like 20 years ago or whatever. Right? But with the internet and these online platforms, we think this is actually quite important. So that's a feature of the model, and also it sort of fundamentally affects the nature of insights that we derive. Right? You don't have to send people on a date first up, right? Like you can have them look at the profiles one after the other.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay. So, and one interesting insight, just coming back to the summary, is that we find that the platform design matters even when the relative cost of screening, so that this is relative to sort of the average match utility, this vanishes. Okay, so you can think of technology becoming better and better, and things are so smooth that it takes almost zero effort for you to figure out if you're interested or not, and still you can. So there is still sort of a major impact of search frictions in the market on the aggregate, and design can help even in this limit. And in fact, you can get a Pareto improvement on how well different sets of agents are doing by choosing a good design. Okay. So I'll just go quickly over this. So just briefly, our modeling and formulation approach, it brings together elements from multiple sort of very rich strands of work, including the search frictions in labor markets literature, the two-sided platforms literature, right? So this is the externalities that agents have on each other, as well as the stable matching literature, which is focused on very detailed individual level preferences. Right, so there's nice elements of all of these strands of work, by the way, which each of which has at least one Nobel Prize, potentially more, and we kind of bring it together in a suitable way to address the problem at hand. We are using a stationary equilibrium concept, so there's some history there, and there is some connection with works in operations management and operations research. One can also think of this as an inventory management problem on steroids. So there's a two-sided inventory situation, right, for the two sides of the market. And these are no longer passive inventory units. These are strategic agents, and they do their own thing. So it's quite a rich inventory management problem in that sense. Okay, so now, so a lot of hand waving. So now I want to make it a little bit more concrete. So let me tell you what the model is that we study. Okay, so this is the default, meaning that this is under the default platform design, and then we'll look at potential alternate designs that the platform can use. Okay, I'm going to use men and women for the two sides of the market, and at some point I'll break the symmetry, but this is just like language, right? You can flip the roles of men and women, you can talk about workers and firms. So I'm not trying to make any like gender specific point or anything of that kind. Okay, so women arrive at a rate which we will denote by lambda W, and men arrive at a rate which we'll denote by lambda M. Okay. Now, every agent I has a valuation for matching with agent J on the other side. Okay, so they have some utility for this match, which is going to be a sum of two terms. The first term is a quality term, which is a characteristic of the agent J. Right, so this is common across any I who considers agent J, and this quality of agent J is known to the platform and to the agents, and for now we'll set it to 0 for all agents. Okay, so this is a flat market, everybody has the same quality, and what really matters then is just the second term of the utility, the idiosyncratic term, which is a function of both I and J, and we will have a very simple model for it. It will be IID uniform 0, 1. Now, this thing is not known to anybody beforehand. Agent I can spend a cost C to learn it. Okay, so this is like they have to spend time to read the profile. Think of it as that. And if they do that, then they figure out how much they are actually interested in matching with this person. Now, the heart of the model is going to be the search and matching. So this is going to be on the next slide. But just where does it start? Every agent will be endowed with a clock. It will be a Poisson clock in our model. It rings at the rate 1, which means that they open the app or whatever, right? And they're ready to make some effort towards finding a match. At that point, the match process will start. So they can ask for a partner and whatnot. This will come on the next slide. In order to make sure you don't have agents, like agent quantity is just building up to infinity in this dynamic model, we will have that each agent leaves exogenously at some small rate. Okay, so they just sort of time out and just leave the market at some point if nothing is happening. And our focus will be on a monopolistic platform that chooses a design to maximize the overall welfare in stationary equilibrium. Okay. So this is the match process. Okay, so just ignore the parentheses for now. The parentheses are for when there are qualities. We'll come to that only later. So there's no qualities, and agents. Suppose agent I is clock rings. So now agent I has the option to ask for a candidate, a potential match. If they don't, then nothing happens.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you again, sir. The overall welfare here for the platform, that means the cumulative utility of both sides of the platform. Is that what it is being optimized?
Yes. Yes, it's going to be just the average welfare of an agent, and this is like a weighted sum of over the two sides of the platform, right? If they have equal arrival rates, it's the vanilla average.
Okay, and that is what needs to be maximized for the
platform. I will come to that. Okay, so yeah, okay, just give me a couple minutes. You'll have the whole model. It's going to come in several slides. This is, there's a few more after this, right? About the objective, the equilibrium concept, and then I'll pause. And you can definitely ask if there's any confusion. Okay, so just coming back to what happens with this, when an agent's clock rings. So if agent I's clock rings, they can ask for a potential match. If they don't, then nothing happens. No match is formed. If they ask for a potential match, then platform I gives them a uniformly random unmatched person on the other side. Now, faced with this option, right, like a profile on the screen, whatever, the agent can spend some cost C to a screening cost, which to discover their utility for matching with this agent J. If they choose not to, they can still choose whether or not to propose to that agent. Okay, whether or not they screen them. If they choose not to propose, nothing happens. But if they propose, this proposal is conveyed to agent J, who again has the option to screen and discover the match value at a cost C. And then they have the option to accept the proposal or not. If they reject, nothing happens. But if everything goes through, then I and J form a match and they leave. Both of them leave the market. Okay. And I want to emphasize here that the utility that I has from J for matching with J in the model is completely distinct from the utility that J has for matching with I. Okay, you can think of modeling this differently, but this is the model that we have. Okay, so this is the match process. When there are qualities, then the agent in the default design, the agents can ask for a potential partner of a given quality. And when they receive a proposal, they also know the quality of the person who has sent the proposal. So what are the components of an agency strategy? So there are, this is somewhat involved and quite a rich setup. So they have a proposal strategy. So whenever their clock rings, should they request a candidate or not? And should they screen or not? They have an incoming proposal strategy. So if somebody proposes to them, they can screen or not, and they can accept or not. And then there is an acceptability threshold. So when they screen, should they go ahead or not? And that's going to be whether or not this match utility exceeds some continuation value or some acceptable the acceptability threshold. Okay, so you need to specify all these things to specify the strategy of an individual agent. Okay, the default design is where both sides can propose and quality information is visible. And we will just consider two kinds of interventions. The first one is prevent one side from proposing. You can think of just switching off their Poisson clocks, for instance. And the other one is going to be hiding quality information, which is similar to what dating platforms do. This just means that the agents on the other side don't have the ability to request a potential partner of a given quality, and they cannot see the quality of the agent on the other side, even if they get a proposal coming in. Okay. This preventing one side from proposing is like Bumble's design, just roughly, loosely, or request to book on Airbnb. Okay, so the equilibrium concept will be stationary equilibrium. So the idea is this: it's a fixed point kind of a definition. So you fix agent strategies. This induces a steady state in the system. The agent strategies then should be a best response to that steady state in the system. So you need this sort of fixed point to hold. In that case, you have a stationary equilibrium. And we actually need a refinement of that, which is evolutionarily stable equilibria, to rule out some implausible equilibria, which are nevertheless stationary equilibria. And then the objective, so this will be the last model slide, so this one, by the way, is optional. Like, this is our choice here, but you can have a different one. Once you have the equilibrium characterization, you can just pick based on whatever you think is important between the different designs. Okay, so the objective here that we'll talk about is which permitted intervention solves the problem of maximizing social welfare for a given marketplace. Okay, so let me pause here and take any questions. Okay, obviously the model is important. Okay, so let's start with ex-ante homogeneous agents, which means that there's no qualities in the market. And it turns out that design matters even in this case. Okay, so let's warm up with the symmetric market. So you have equal arrival rates of men and women. You have equal screening costs. And there's obviously an equal rate of leaving unmatched because it's fully symmetric. And just by counting argument. So what do we find? We find that in all stable equilibria, there is a spontaneous breaking of symmetry, and one side does the proposing and the other waits for incoming proposals. Okay, everything is set up, is symmetric in the setup, but the equilibria are unsymmetric. Okay, and there's three regimes. The first is when both sides screen, which happens for small screening costs. The second, middle regime, is where one side screens, and the last one is where no side of the market screens. Okay, so this plot has the average welfare on the y-axis and the screening cost on the x-axis. So as you might imagine, as the screening cost grows, the average welfare in equilibrium goes down. And there are these three different segments corresponding to the three different equilibria. Okay, so this is both sides screen. And so men are the ones doing the proposal. This is sort of one of the two symmetric equilibria. So both sides screen, men screen and propose, women screen and accept or reject. The medium C regime, the men do not anymore screen and propose, they just propose without screening, and then the women screen and accept or reject. And then this final regime where both sides are doing the thing without screening. So now I have a question for you. Okay, so this is a riddle. So in exactly this setting, you get to choose whether you are, so there are these two symmetric equilibria, right? One where the men propose, the other where the women propose. Would you like to be on the proposing side or on the receiving side? Which do you think will give you a better utility?
Receiving one.
Very good. And why is that? Okay, I can, good. So the answer is that indeed the receiving side is doing better here. Okay, so Anuj is absolutely right. So this pink curve is showing the expected utility of the women in the equilibria, and the blue curve is showing the expected utility of the men in the equilibria, right? And the deal is that the receiving side kind of has it good because they get like pre-screen matches, in the sense that the person who proposed to them, they don't have to worry now about getting rejected anymore. They already have an incoming proposal. So they never spend screening effort on somebody who will eventually reject them. But the men have to face that. And in fact, that causes them, for any screening cost above 0.03, to stop screening in the first place. And they get nothing but the average. Like this is just the blind average utility, which is half, because uniform 0-1 was the distribution, right? So this is like, if I do nothing, I get half. So that's what they are getting even from a screening cost above 0.03.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, Professor, I have a question.
Absolutely.
See, in this case, in case of men and women, we are seeing that the men are the ones who are not indulging in screening as the screening costs increase. So, I mean, one can come up with various reasons why it might happen, but in other kind of markets, when instead of men and women, you have some other agents, other types of agents. What is it that factor? What is that one factor which will determine that one side indulges in screening and the other side does not indulge in screening?
Good. So here, men and women are just names I'm giving for the two sides of the market. So had I like, and by the way, there are two symmetric equilibria here. There is another equilibrium where the women are the ones proposing, and then whatever I'm saying about men, it applies to the women there, and the men's, I mean, the roles are interchanged. So I think you're taking a more applied perspective here. So I think at this point it would be we can come back to this later, right? Just a sort of a high level discussion of what actually matters. But here we are trying to model very specific features of the market while abstracting away all other features, right? And within this model, we want to see what are the kinds of equilibria that arise. And this is something far from obvious, at least to us. And now that we figured out what the answer is, I'm trying to share that with you. So I'm not saying anything about dating and men and so on right now.
No, neither am I. So I'm
okay.
So this finding is interesting in the sense one side chooses to screen, another side does not screen. I was just wondering, is there an explanation for why one side will and one side will not?
Okay, good.
Because
good.
if this is observed in various other scenarios, then what is the determining factor which basically takes one, which makes one group indulge in this and the other not indulge in this?
So there's a spontaneous breaking of symmetry within our model. So suppose, I'm an age, let's say I'm a man, and the rest of the market is in the situation where the men are the ones who are proposing and the women are the ones who are waiting for incoming proposals. So at this point, I can choose to not do anything and wait for an incoming proposal, but the women are not making proposals, they are waiting. So I'm going to be left high and dry. So at this point, I might as well make the effort, because as long as it satisfies individual rationality, which means I get better utility by making the effort than not making the effort. But on the other hand, if the market was in the opposite equilibrium, and by the way, for the women, there's a similar calculation. They're like, okay, what should I do? All other women are waiting for incoming proposals. The men are making the effort. So why would I make the effort? Because when I make the effort, I have a chance of facing rejection, in which case my screening effort goes waste. So I'll just wait. Once I get an incoming proposal, which will inevitably happen at some point, then I can screen, and I can do so with the confidence that if I like this person, they have already expressed interest in me, so we can match. I will not waste my screening effort. So this is sort of the reason that this is an equilibrium. Okay, so let us compare this with the first best, which means that suppose there was a planner who could prescribe agent strategies. What is the average welfare that this planner could have achieved, right? And this, in fact, is the black dotted line here, and then of course it converts into this solid line and this small dotted line. So there is again 3 regimes, and in fact the second and third regimes match with the equilibrium. So the equilibrium is efficient in the second and third regimes, But in this first regime, which is actually a bit longer, a larger first regime for the planner, the planner can achieve a higher welfare or a higher utility. And the reason is that there is an externality which obviously the agents don't account for in their decision making. Okay, so in equilibrium, so the recipients are actually putting a burden on the proposers by being selective. So when they are selective and they reject someone, that person's effort also goes waste, right? And they don't internalize that because they are just looking out for themselves. And this negative externality of screening by recipients on the proposers is the thing driving the difference between the planner solution and the equilibrium. Okay, so this is an inefficiency number one.
So the way, sorry, Professor, I had one question. Maybe my understanding is wrong, but if I'm just looking at this graph and if I just have to think in a different way, the way it appears is don't do any screening. It's always the best welfare.
So if nobody does any screening, you're going to be at half because the average of uniform 0-1 is half, right?
No, I am seeing that the graph, the zero screening is at 1, right?
Zero screening is not 1, zero screening is half.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the graph in a different way. Okay.
So the average welfare is defined as the average over agents of their expected utility. And if nobody screens, then even if they match, they get a expected utility of half, which is the average of uniform 0-1.
Okay.
Okay, and that is exactly what happens in the equilibrium when no one screens, which is the one that happens for a C above 0.125.
Okay.
So once there's a large enough screening cost, it does boil down to that. But when it's smaller, then like some or all of the agents actually screen. Yeah, thank you for that question. Okay. So here you have these the spontaneous breaking of symmetry and equilibrium, preventing one side from proposing. So it's like suppose Bumble comes in and says the men cannot propose. You will have the women proposing equilibrium. It will not improve the average welfare, but it will make sure that one side is getting a higher welfare, the other one is suffering a little bit. The moment you have an unsymmetric market, right, where let's say the men are arriving faster, you actually can select the higher welfare equilibrium by doing this. Okay, so that's what's coming up next. Okay, so far we had just a symmetric market. Okay, so this just to emphasize our sorry, I'm just trying to manage my screen space. Okay, so just to emphasize, our intervention here acts asymmetrically and it helps the side which is actually when you prevent one side from proposing, it's actually helping that side and it's hurting the other side. The ones who have to make the proposals actually end up spending more effort. So now this is going to get more interesting. Now we have an unbalanced market, which means we have different arrival rates on the two sides. There's some technical condition like the difference should be at least 25% in the arrival rates. And if the screening cost is less than 1/8, this is a theorem which says that the faster arriving side, which we will call men, they are the ones who propose in all equilibrium and the women do not propose at all. Okay, so this is without any design. The platform is not doing anything. Just inherently in the equilibrium, competitive forces kind of put pressure on the long side because you have to compete over scarce agents. And it turns out it rules out the equilibria where the short side was proposing. So you cannot sustain an equilibrium where women are proposing because the men are like, you know what, they are proposing, but I am on the long side and I might not get a match. So let me just make the effort and see if something happens. Right? And this is what happens in terms of the average welfare and the regimes, right? So the regime in which the men are screening and proposing is very, very small. If the screening cost is anything above this tiny number, right, you have an equilibrium where the men are proposing without screening. Okay, and the reason is that they don't want to waste their screening effort if they are mostly likely to get rejected. And on top of that, if they are too selective, before they get a chance to match, they might time out, right? Because other men are sort of grabbing up the women as and when they get a chance. right? So the middle regime becomes much larger, and obviously the men will suffer in terms of their outcome here, because at best they get a uniformly random match, right? They are not being selective at all. They're just proposing without screening. So can this inefficiency be alleviated by a platform design intervention? And the answer is yes. Okay, and what is the intervention? It says prevent the men from proposing. So when the platform says the men can't propose, then obviously the women have no choice but to propose. Otherwise, no, they're not going to match, right? So the women will make the effort to propose. And now you have this sort of healthy regime where they are screening and proposing. So they are able to be selective. And they can do so without too much fear of rejection, because the men anyway are on the wrong side. They are selective, but not overly so. The long side agents are not overly selective. As a result, both sides actually get a pretty healthy welfare. And you can see this gap even in the average welfare. Okay, so you get a gain of about 10% with our specific modeling choices, and this, by the way, should be an underestimate of how much this should affect things in a real platform, because people don't sort of behave rationally. I won't go too much into that. Okay. There's an interesting phenomenon here, which is you can notice that this both side screen equilibrium has a higher welfare than the one where the men are the ones who are when the women are proposing without screening. So why is there this sort of discontinuity here? Okay, this is related to an interesting positive externality of selectivity on the long side. So when the men are more selective, so they reject some incoming proposals, this means that other men get more proposals. And since they are competing over scarce women, this actually helps everyone. This helps everyone because, hey, like there is some woman out there for each man, but only if they see a few options can they find that woman, right? And when other men are being selective, they will see more options. So this is good for everybody. Okay, so this design intervention actually helps in that way as well by enhancing this virtuous cycle. Okay, so the direction of proposals has flipped over, and now the men are doing substantially better at a small cost to the women within the model. Okay, so potentially Bumble's design actually might be helpful to the men to save their search effort and be more selective instead of mindlessly liking profiles of women on a dating app. Again, in the model, the women get slightly hurt, but in practice, they might actually also be happier not getting inundated with incoming interest, right? So typically they don't want that. So now they can sort of have a better experience on the app where they can have more meaningful interaction and not just a deluge of interest, which typically tends to dissuade them from actually participating. Okay, and in fact, there was a time when Tinder was considering a similar feature. I am not sure if they actually implemented it eventually, but they had piloted it at a certain point in time where the women can choose to be the ones to control that they have to be the ones to initiate the conversation. Okay. So there's an interesting thing here, which is that you can again compare with the first best, and what we see is that, you know what, like the design intervention is bringing the welfare up, but there's still a gap between the equilibrium welfare under intervention, which is in blue, and the first best, and this gap actually persists as the screening cost goes to zero. And in fact, as the screening cost goes to zero, the intervention does not improve the welfare. So this red and blue are sort of matching as C tends to zero. So one might ask, as the screening cost becomes very, very small, can design actually help? Can it actually improve the welfare? And this is something we'll explore next in a richer setting where you actually have some qualities of agents as well. Okay, let me pause here in case there are any questions or comments.
Any questions, comments?
Okay, so let me proceed. So just to summarize where we are at, so we saw an interesting equilibrium structure which just arose in our setting on its own. So there were three regimes. The first where both sides screen, the second one where only the recipient screen, and the last one where nobody screens. The boundaries between the regimes, they depended on the ratio between the screening cost and the information to be gained, okay, which is sort of all captured in this C, since the match utilities are of order 1. The inefficiencies, there are inefficiencies at equilibrium. There were two of them. The first was that the recipients were too selective because they were not internalizing the negative effect they were having on the proposers. And this was reducing the amount of search effort being put in by the proposers. The second one was that the long side always proposes and cannot afford to be selective in the default platform design. Okay, so we proposed a simple intervention, which was that the platform can create a higher welfare equilibrium by making the short or the more selective side propose. And this eliminates inefficiency 2 and mitigates inefficiency 1. The caveat was that the intervention doesn't help as the screening cost tends to 0. Okay. So now we're going to have a richer model, and we're going to introduce multiple quality tiers on the long side of the market. And we will find that the design matters even as the search costs vanish. And in fact, that you can get a Pareto improvement in how well different groups of agents are doing with a better design. Okay. So now we have our two sides of the market. The men are on the long side, but there are two kinds of men. Okay, they're distinguished by their quality. So I'm going to call them the top men and the average men. The top men are scarce, so they arrive at a rate which is smaller than the arrival rate of women. And then there are average men, and the total arrival rate of men exceeds the total arrival rate of women. Okay, so this quality bump that the top men enjoy, we will call this A. Okay, there's some number, and we'll think of it as being between 0 and 1. And this means that basically the match value that a woman has for some top man is distributed between A and 1 plus A. For instance, think of A as half. So it's between half and 1.5. And for an average man, it's between 0 and 1. So there's some overlap in the distributions. So it's not obvious that you always want to match with a top man if you're given a choice. Okay, so it's just to keep things a little bit more interesting. So what is the equilibrium that arises here, okay, with no platform design? This is actually quite interesting. So okay, this is just what I was saying until now. And yeah, just to note, there's not enough women for all the men. And so some average men one should expect they're going to remain unmatched at the end. Okay. So here is the equilibrium. Okay, so this is something that I find quite interesting. The average men are making proposals, and they are not even as the screening cost vanishes, right? They actually, their incentives are such that they face so much rejection, they actually end up proposing without screening. Okay, and we'll see why that's happening as well. The women, they spontaneously break into two groups in equilibrium. There is who we call the reacher women, and these ones, they ignore incoming proposals from average men, and they only seek when they get when the clock rings. They only seek to propose and match with top men. The other group is the settler women. They are open to incoming proposals from the average men, and they will screen and decide whether they want to match or not. And since this is equilibrium, right, like the two groups have the same utility on average. How does that work out? So these reacher women, when they match, the conditional expectation is they get a higher utility. But the way things balance out is that there's a probability that they will fail in their search for a blueprint, for their blueprints. Okay, so on average, they are doing no better than the settler women. And the top men, of course, they sit pretty and they just wait for incoming proposals from the women. Okay, so this we can also see what is happening here to force the average men to propose without screening. Okay, so there is an inspection paradox. These richer women hang around in the system a lot longer because they are just like waiting and trying and hoping that they will match with the top man. So they are overrepresented at any snapshot in time in the system. So almost all the women in the system are the richer women because the settler women are quickly able to find somebody and leave. Right? So most of the proposals, because these average men, they don't know which woman is a settler versus a richer. Most of their proposals end up with richer women who not just reject them, they ignore the proposals. And so as such, how does it make any sense to spend screening effort when it's going to get ignored? So this is what is driving this sort of very bad equilibrium, and very bad specifically in terms of the expected utility that these average men are earning.
How can we, how can we match or balance this equilibrium? I just wanted to understand this. See, as you said that there are richer women and they keep on waiting for somebody better. Or I would say men also in some prospect, they would also fall in some category. In some of the, percentage of men also will fall in this category. So how do we balance this? Because this leaves no option, because they will stay longer in the system and they will lose their value. The candidate will lose the value.
I think you're raising some deep and important societal questions. Here, I'll just go back to my earlier sort of response, which is that I've just given them names as women and men, and I'm trying to give you an interesting story. But solving the societal problem, I have many thoughts on this, but I don't have solutions, and it will be a very interesting discussion, right? So maybe like if there's some time after the session, or we can schedule a time separately to talk about these things.
Sure, I would love that, because this looks very interesting, and this is not only fit for a dating app, but this can be used. This is actually used for a lot of other matching apps also, or sometimes I think I have seen this kind of thing in finance application, or I think some other part of equilibrium is a basic rule for every matching or B2B site, B2C. I am not very sure right now, but I'm just
it'll take some time just to even work out like how to map the model to whatever situation you're thinking about. Like, even for me, it'll take me some time. Let's do this a little bit later if you don't mind. But yeah, thank you for engaging and thinking creatively about what this means and what can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just coming back again, so this is the equilibrium, and this is within our model where there is only one kind of woman, but there are two quality tiers of men. I'm not saying this is the case in practice, right? It's just the case in which we've tried to characterize here. So this equilibrium, the average men are really suffering, and it suffers from two major sources of inefficiency relative to the first best. The first is that the average men are proposing without screening, because their proposals are mostly ignored by these richer women. And so they are not being selective at all. And when they match, they get a utility, which is just the utility of a random partner, which is half. And the second problem is that there are a substantial chunk of women who are leaving without matching. And this is the chunk of richer women who just get unlucky and fail to find their blueprints. And so this is not, their average utility is still the same as the settler women. But what this means is that the scarce side of the market, some of them are not even matching. And so even the people who could have matched on the long side, if the planner was choosing how things happen, there's less matches on both sides, right? So there are some men who could have matched in principle, but they don't, just because there are women also who are going unmatched. Okay, so, and this, by the way, could be a caricatured reason for the bad experience of this man. This is an article, and it says this man swiped right on 200,000 women on Tinder over a summer, spent $6,000 on dates and didn't get anywhere. Okay, so maybe this is like somehow parallel to the story of the average man here. Okay, so the first design intervention we are very familiar with, which is that we will make the short side of the market make the proposals. Okay, so we will prevent the men from proposing, and as a result, the settler women will screen and propose, and they'll be open to doing this to the average men as well. And the richer women will continue their thing as before. What is the consequence of this? So now the men no longer have this fear of being ignored or rejected, right? They have incoming proposals. So for those incoming proposals, they already know that the person is interested. So they can screen and then they can accept or reject with some degree of selectivity. And this is not a very high degree of selectivity. So it doesn't really impose that much burden on the settler women who are making the proposals. So they actually enjoy and improve match quality, and this is good. But the number of matches doesn't somehow improve because there are still the richer women and some fraction of them get unlucky. So we want to find a solution to this problem as well. Because this will require a new kind of intervention. And that intervention is that the platform can hide the quality information for the long side of the market. Okay. So here the men are on the long side, and the platform can say, you know what, I have inferred which person is a top man and which is an average man, but I'll not let the women know. If they want this, they ask for a profile, right? I will give them a uniformly random one among all those who are in the system. I will not give them the top one if they ask for it. And so now women cannot actually separate into richers and settlers. They just need to screen to figure out how much they like the person. They don't know their quality a priori. And as a result, you no longer have this fraction of women who get unlucky and leave unmatched. So almost all the women will find a match so in a suitable limit. They will almost all of them will find a match, and this improves the number of matches happening for the men as well, in particular for the average men. So in some sense, it has solved both of the inefficiencies that we noticed in the original default design equilibrium. Okay, so average men are getting more matches and they can be selective as well with the incoming proposals. Okay. So bottom line is that you want to use the combination of interventions, prevent the men from proposing, and hide the quality information from the women. What does this do? As the screening cost goes to zero in that limit, right? The utility of the men remains, of the top men, is always 1. Okay. So this remains true even with our interventions. The utility of the women is also expected utility is 1. Okay. So they are able to get sort of a match partner whose expected match value is 1. They don't spend a huge amount of screening costs in that process. So these two groups are not affected by the intervention. What happens is that the average men benefit when you prevent men from proposing. So first, they are able to make, they are able to be selective. So that helps their utility. And then when you also prevent, so when you hide the types of men from the women, in addition, all the women match, so they are getting more matches as well. So their utility improves without hurting the utility of the other two groups, the women and the top men. Okay, so this is what I was calling a Pareto improvement in the outcome. And this happens as the screening cost goes to 0, right? So this is in contrast to the earlier case wherein as the screening cost goes to 0, the design intervention was not helping the average welfare. Okay. And by the way, this is outside our model, but if you allowed the intervention of charging people for access to top men, so suppose you were charging the women for access to top men, you can actually have the platform earn revenue and you can achieve something close to the first best in terms of the welfare as well. So an informal summary of our theorem. This paper, by the way, is like more technical than I would have liked. It has like 3 digits in terms of the number of pages of technicalities and whatnot. So this is an informal summary So it says that preventing men from proposing and hiding quality information together as a design, this produces a Pareto improvement in welfare as C goes to 0, and the maximum improvement comes from combining the interventions. Let me check the time. Okay, so we should be wrapping up soon. So yeah, so this is actually just my last slide. So I shared with you a dynamic model. It had idiosyncratic match values and strategic agents engaging in a costly search for partners. The design, so the platform design helps in selecting between equilibria and also in creating new equilibria. When one side is more selective, we said make that side propose. This improves the market performance. And also when there are quality tiers, you should partially hide the quality information from the short side of the market to prevent agents from obsessing over dream matches while ignoring others. Okay. So design, it turns out, matters even when the screening cost is vanishing, which might be somewhat counterintuitive. And in our model, in fact, you get a Pareto improvement in welfare through a smart design. Okay, in terms of like where this work kind of sits, I think you might argue with many specific model features. You might say there are other kinds of design decisions that are important, and you would be right on both counts. But we think now we've done this work, and in some sense, it gives you a sort of template to come up with a model suitable to your situation, potentially to take it to data, and to come up then with counterfactuals. I have a different design. What will be the new equilibrium? This is the hard thing, right? This is where you cannot just use machine learning and be like, I'll throw the data in and the answer will pop out. You have to do counterfactuals. It gives you a framework to systematically do these counterfactuals and address design decisions in these types of matching platform situations. Okay. Okay, that's what I had. Thank you so much. And yeah, now is the time for some discussion and questions. I have, I think, about 7 minutes before I have to run out somewhere.
Any questions, comments?
Not for me. This was a very new topic for me, and first time I was introduced to this topic. So very informative. Thank you so much, sir, Professor Kanoria. Yeah. So I still need to read a lot about this before I can, make any intelligent question I can ask you. But this has been very informative so far.
Thank you. We actually wrote a blog post about this as well. But yeah, I think after the talk, the blog post might be a little bit like less info than even the talk. The paper is going to be dense. But yeah, we have put in like years of effort into satisfying the referees. So it is, I think, it's a piece of writing that at least I can vouch for. But it's going to be dense and pretty technical. So, but I'm happy to talk more if something comes up.
I'll definitely connect with you. So it's been actually very eye-opener for me. And while we were discussing and I was listening to you, I actually downloaded Bumble and I wanted to try whatever equilibrium you were discussing, since you mentioned 2 or 3 matching dating apps. So yes, little more knowledge on this subject is required for me. But thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, just was a bit curious on one aspect. So as for any app, let's take an example of dating apps. So they will have a strategy in their apps to start with, but this equilibrium will keep on changing dynamically, but they cannot change their model or the strategy based on different points at which the equilibrium changes. So I'm just wondering how to implement that in their apps if this is the findings.
Yeah. So I think many of these comments are very good, and many of them are touching on like important real world features which go beyond our model. So I think you're hinting at like some sort of behavioral situation in society and also the competitive environment from other apps, right? It's like
yeah, for example, the finding says, okay, at some point in time, till one situation prevails, your uh, the overall, I would say, utility or the welfare which you described is at one level. What I'm saying is, for example, at some point in time, say settler women or whatever we categorize them, that changes, or your parameter of the top men and the average men, they might change the overall welfare at some point in time. But the app has decided that, okay, women are going to take the first initiative, so that is their strategy to start with. But at some point in time, that equilibrium can be disturbed, right? So they go back and then redo their strategy in that case?
Yeah, this is a great point. So these things, I mean, I might go off on a few tangents, right? But just bear with me. So one thing is that you can't just experiment with these designs like repeatedly, right? I mean, this is true even if the situation is static, but you don't know what's the best design, which is typically the case, right? They are just like shooting in the dark, then they make some adjustment, but you can't do that too often because like your whole branding and the user experience, everything gets messed up, right? So this makes it all the more important to be able to do these counterfactuals and come up with a pretty good guess of like what's going to work well, and do that in the first or second attempt. I mean, that said, these folks are quite open to making modifications and what they think of as upgrades on the fly, and these can be of different magnitudes, right? I mean, like Bumble's thing of like the woman has to send the first message. This is like the zero thought of branding of the app. So I agree that it's very hard for them to change it. And I mean, frankly, they are not doing it for like just monopolistic reasons. They're definitely not because of the thing that I raised here, though it might be helping their performance. They are doing it just to like distinguish themselves in a competitive situation where there are many platforms out there and they need to like be special in some way, right? And so if it's like the thing which is your primary branding and your distinguishing feature, it's very hard to change that in itself. But like going in and like giving people, so this quality thing, what does it mean, right? It's not very clear, but it's like mostly a behavioral thing rather than something inherent to the person. And like this could be analogous potentially to race. It's a fraud topic. I should not even say all these things, but it's like, are they allowing you to filter based on race, for instance? These types of things, they are willing to keep changing all the time, right? There's always a reason. You can always explain whatever decision you make, and they are willing to change these types of things on the fly, and they do that. And it could be in response to changes in the market primitives, I think is what you were hinting, right? Different arrival rates change, like your quality parameter changes.
Yes, true.
It could be that, it could be like optics, it could be the competitive environment. So these guys are very nimble compared to traditional businesses in many ways. And they do keep making changes and seeing how things play out. You cannot just measure though, like I make a change, I can't in the next week measure what's the impact, because the market has to find the new equilibrium. It takes a while. Even 1 week is a long time, but this takes even longer. So you can't mess around too much, but they also learn from each other, right? Somebody else did something, you're like, oh, what happened there? Do I think I want to do the same thing? I mean, very interesting topics to talk about. Yeah, so I touched on some things. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about.
It would be great too if you can point some sources. I mean, it'll be really helpful to explore this topic further. If you could just point to some sources on that.
Sources being papers, or
it could be any references. Could be any reference. Could be
I see,
blogs or papers or anything, or books, whatever.
Yeah, these things, it's interesting. I guess like some folks like me should like sit down and put this stuff together, right? Most of it happens inside companies, and even I like sometimes struggle to get access because they just don't want to share, and they're very protective of both the data and even sort of letting you in sometimes. If let me do this, like if I think of something, I can send you an email, right?
Sure.
I mean, oftentimes it's just like conversations or actually going and engaging with the thing itself and seeing how it works out.
Sure.
One common theme which I think it has high impact and people don't realize is that recommendations work differently on matching platforms than on Netflix or on Google or Amazon, right? I mean, it should be obvious to anybody who thinks about it, including all of you, but somehow they don't get it, right? So in Netflix and Google, you can recommend the same thing to everybody if that's what they want, right? You just want to satisfy, you want to maximize, you want to optimize for likes or for just satisfying the person who's getting the recommendations. Here, what's the point of getting a whole bunch of likes if it's not converting to matches? You should be optimizing for matches. I mean, when I finished my PhD 10 years back, like they kind of didn't get it. And now also like many of them just don't get it, right? So I'm just mystified. But this is, I think, something that any of us who encounter a matching platform can help with. You want to see not just whether this person will like the profile, but whether it can be reciprocated and converted into a match down the road.
Professor, I have one kind of remark and one question. Based on the work that you have presented, I feel one implication, especially let's say in a matching platform where we are matching job applicants to recruiters, it seems to me that it would be better if it's the job recruiters who are allowed to reach out to job applicants and not the other way around.
This is what you suggest, or?
But this seems to me to say like this is something I infer from the presentation. Maybe my inference is wrong, given that the arrival rate of job applicants will be higher and recruiters will be smaller in number on the platform.
I see. So this I think it varies from labor market to labor market and from one time to the next. But in like the Indian labor market, maybe this is. I get where you're coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the question that I had was in your model, you have assumed a uniform distribution for match value. Even if I take the example of Bumble, is that a valid assumption for distribution of, say, people? Will it not be closer to a bell curve for normal distribution?
No, this uniform is like highly stylized, so I don't think it's valid in any market. The hope was we can get insights where the insight is at least qualitatively robust. Quantitatively, it'll be off because the actual distribution is different, and potentially the actual distribution might even be heavy tailed, right? Depending on which market you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So I think those things would be interesting to explore. Like one could potentially just explore those things also just numerically, right? I mean, proving things is its own beast. So this is like one less thing for us to worry about, and maybe shrink the appendix from like 200 pages to 150 or something, right? But that's about it.
Fascinating presentation. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me put my email in the chat, and then I'm really sorry I need to take my leave.
Yes.
This is when our day starts, I guess.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure visiting.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Yash. I just wanted to add one thing here that you are such a rigorous researcher, and one thing I have learned from you is you put things in such simple way. But if one reads your papers and understands the depth of your work, one can realize it's fascinating to read your research. If one goes through your papers, I struggle, to be honest with you. But you put things in such a simple way as if it looks like it's just a cakewalk kind of thing. So thank you so very much for this fascinating talk, and also just putting it out that, to being a rigorous researcher and being an accomplished researcher and still being so simple and humble is one of the traits one should follow. So thanks once again.
Thank you for those very generous and warm compliments.